Welcome to IT management, and this time we're going to talk about having a bad boss. Even managers can have a bad boss sometimes, of course. And it's important that before you make any decisions about your boss, because as a manager in IT, your boss is probably a director, could be a vice president, or even the CIO. So before you even talk to your boss about the issue, ask yourself first if maybe the problem's with you. And people don't want to hear this, but that can be a problem. You might be doing something or perceiving something incorrectly. One of the things I've run into quite a few times is members of my team would get frustrated with me and think I was hiding stuff from them or not telling them the whole truth. And as a manager yourself, you'll understand that there are days when you have to make 15, 20 different decisions. Well, your boss is in the same boat as you are. And so when that happens, he doesn't have the time to explain every single decision to every member of the team. Sometimes you just have to trust your boss. So if that's the case, you might want to give it a little bit more time before you escalate this situation. But the first and most important thing is don't go over your boss's head. That's they say that to employees, don't go over your manager's head. But that happens all the time. You kind of got to get used to that, and your boss will know that. But as a manager, if your boss is a director and you try to go to the CIO and you haven't talked this through with your boss yet, it's going to be a problem. There is an exception to that. If your boss is sexually harassing someone or is just berating a fellow employee or taking money on the sly from a vendor and you know about it, you probably should go over his head, and that right quick. But for just the day-to-day stuff, you really don't want to do that. What you want to do is first try to talk to your boss, and not in a confrontational way. Just say, hey, I was curious about this, or wonder why you felt like this or said this in the meeting. I'm not upset, I'm just curious, and see if you can't work it through. And probably 8, 9 times out of 10, that'll work. You just kind of talk it through a little bit before you go flying off the handle. When it doesn't work, you still want to try to not go over his head. There are times in your life you just have a bad boss and you got to work around things. And that term bad boss is pretty wide open too. So I'll get into some stories about this later, but I was working once consulting with a company, and they were having problems with their ETLs and speed of their database. And the CIO seemed like a pretty good guy, nice enough and everything. And the more I started talking to him, I realized the problem was all his doing. And I don't think he even did this intentionally, but this is something you got to watch for, that as managers, when you have programmers, you want to watch when they're resume building, right? When they're spending too much time and they're just doing that to build their resumes. A little bit of that's okay. You have to let people build their skill sets. But this can happen with a director and a CIO level too. And if you're under them, it makes for a bad boss. It really does. What this guy had done is they had this database, and it was, I asked about the size of it and everything. He said, we have far in excess of a petabyte of data. Wow, this wasn't a huge company. And so I asked, what's the nature of the data? Because a petabyte of SQL data is a ton of data. It's just hard to wrap your mind around unless you're Amazon. And what it was this company had done projects for people to put bids out. So if somebody was building a building, they'd put all the drawings together and put the bid out to 6 or 7 contractors in the area. But what they did is every bid packet they kept in the database. So these are CAD drawings, pictures, massive files. So one set of these files could be 10 gig, 15 gig. Well, that's still a long way from a petabyte. So what he did is said, well, we need to make sure that everything that we send out, we keep every bit of it. But this was duplicated data. And he knew that, and he just kept it in there. And I never could get a straight answer from him why he did this. And I realized he was resume building. And so here's another reason why you don't want to do that. You're going to get caught. And what I mean by that is he was trying to climb this ladder and say, well, my last place, we managed a petabyte of data. Yeah, you didn't. When I looked at it, I'm telling you, that thing probably wasn't a terabyte. But when he ever did get this new job and they expected him to handle a petabyte of data, of transactional data, he was going to have no idea what he did. And the rest of his team was in the same boat. Big giant images stored in a database as binary files is not the same thing as a million transactions an hour. And you're not building a skill set. Hell, you'd be just as good to write it down. So that's just one example of a bad boss that isn't berating anybody or doing anything like that, but it's a huge and serious problem, and he was the only one that knew it. And you see that a lot in IT, that your boss may not be as technical as you are, and you're probably not as technical as your team is. But geez, when you get into the CFO and the CEOs, they're not technical at all. So people pull the wool over their eyes a little bit to pad their resumes. And when you realize how bad that is for your career, it can make for a really bad situation. So again, it's not just a boss that's berating or micromanaging, which, as we said in our last video, sometimes is okay. There's a lot of things that make this up. Some of them you're not going to be able to do anything about. You're just going to be stuck with it. Again, I always fall back on my 25 years experience. A lot of times, if you just wait that out, if you really feel like you're not the only one that knows this, more often than not, after a year or so, which I know is a long time to go through that kind of thing, but it'll fix itself. Now, if you absolutely have to go over your boss's head, before you do that, again, unless it's a harassment issue or a crime being committed, have an exit plan, because this may not go well for you and you could end up losing your job. There are worse things in the world. If you're miserable every day about what this lady or this guy is doing to you or to the team, and you feel like they're really hurting the company, you're going to have to stand up for yourself at some point. Go over his head. Have your act together before you go into these CIOs. Here is exactly what's going on. I have documentation of this. I don't know if you need it, but this is a serious situation. I think it's affecting the company. I know I could lose my job by coming to you. That's the risk I'm willing to take. Because if this goes on, I wouldn't want to work here anyway, and I don't think I'll be able to. I think he'll do real damage to the company. But before you do that, have an exit plan. Have your resume together. Doesn't mean you open up your LinkedIn to free to hire to everybody, but maybe start building your contact list again, and just be prepared for the worst. Again, though, don't become a drone and just put up with it for 10 years. You'll be miserable. This is still your life. As far as I know, you only get the one life, so you should try to enjoy it as much as you can. Even at work, you don't want to be miserable. So if you think it's right, do it, but prepare for the worst. So in other videos, we'll talk about more about bad CIOs and bad directors in terms of either resume building or not knowing what they're doing. So that's a part of the focus on this, but the bigger part of it is directors and CIOs with their hair on fire all the time, treating people poorly. That's the kind of thing here that if you go to them, and sometimes even before you go over there, it's, hey, you got to watch how you treat people sometimes. It's just letting you know, it's filtered down to my team. You know, if the boss flies off his hand and says, well, I'm the man, I'm the boss, I can do what I want, that's a red flag. So maybe prepare. That's about the point. If you can't engage with them or can't communicate, it's not going to end well. So that's it for this one. I'm going to try to keep these from here on in under 10 minutes. And this is one you could talk about for hours. And later on, I hope to get into more specifics, and we'll have how to better handle non-technical bosses, which happens all the time, and that can be a crucial issue. Bosses that are kind of stuck in an old way of doing things, or bosses that are way too far out on the bleeding edge and expecting things to work. Bosses that work too closely with the sales department say, well, we promise this, we have to do it. Well, we can't. So we've talked about that before. Sometimes that's the answer. So I hope you got a little bit out of this one as well. And we'll keep them coming. Thank you for watching.